Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Craig, Superintendent of the West Aurora Schools, and welcome to episode 27. Today's guest is our 11-year veteran District Athletic Director, Mr. Jason Buckley. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's always fun to, we have our X's and O's of academic rigor that we pursue, and then some of our board people in our community, but athletics is a heartthrob of a lot of what high schools do and even our middle schools. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. We often say that we're the front porch of the school.
There you go.
Because, from a community standpoint, that's what people see first a lot of times.
Absolutely.
And so glad to be representing.
Especially when the bright lights are on and a lot of crowd gather up in our facilities. So if you could talk to us a little bit about what kind of nudged you towards the profession of education, and then how that kind of blended with your athletic passions and pursuits.
Sure. Yeah, so I had some great mentors in high school. I went to Naperville North High School and had great teachers and coaches. And one of the people I kind of gravitated to was my state and local politics teacher, Glenn Schneider, who was a councilman in Naperville, and he really brought out my passion for social studies.
Wow.
And it was after taking that class as a sophomore, I continued to kind of follow that track a little bit more as a junior and senior, and knew I wanted to get into education. So I went on to Aurora University and started out as an education major, and quickly took a different turn, if you will, and got into political science and thought, well, you know what? Politics might be my thing. And not that I wanted to necessarily run for office or anything like that, but I thought that getting involved at the state or local level would be something that I would pursue in some form or fashion. Once again, I didn't see myself necessarily as running for any public office, but being involved at that level, I thought was something that was really interesting to me. And
interesting road to travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually graduated with a degree in political science and went immediately right back to education and got a master's right away. And, so then when I went home, and my parents would say, I told you so. And so I kind of ended up back where I started. But, and that dovetailed really nicely with my athletic pursuits, and played basketball at Aurora University, and actually participated for 3 years on the golf team, and one year on the football team as well when I was in grad school. And so great experience, gave me a lot of perspective
Absolutely.
on a number of different sports at a pretty early age. And so then from there went on to work in the Oswego district for 11 years and was a head basketball coach at Oswego East for 8 years. So from that standpoint, I've been able to be around a lot of different sports, and still, while I was in Oswego, being able to teach social studies and government specifically, I was kind of living the dream, and that was something that I was really passionate about, and be able to do both of those things, teach government and social studies and coach. It was awesome. And then, having the opportunity to come to West Aurora was something I just couldn't pass up. And when that opportunity became available, I jumped at it and been here ever since.
So I'm going to highlight a couple of pieces there. This last one, of course, I was on the one end of the stick as the principal at Oswego East. Got to enjoy some of your talents as a teacher and a coach at Oswego East, but also when West Aurora came calling and applied some pressure, I still think they stole you away, but now I'm the beneficiary of that as well as, multi-years later, got a chance to come back. So it's an interesting cycle. This is a small community that
Sure.
You just never know where those circles will touch again.
Yeah.
The other piece I want to... Go ahead.
And if I could cut you off, I just want to make mention of, I've gotten some guilt trips in my life from my parents, but I don't think anything compares to the guilt trip I got from you when I was leaving Oswego East. So that was an all-timer, and I probably would have done the same thing if I was in your shoes. So
was certainly my job to try and keep the quality and talent in our building. So. Yeah. We fight for ours, so
That's
absolutely,
right.
I appreciate that. The other piece I want to go back to, because this is an important aspect that sometimes we gloss over. And I know my daughter, when she went into teaching, was influenced by a singular teacher. And I think, when our teachers and coaches, you never know when that moment or that influence will happen, that a kid will pick up on that. And so going back to the teacher at Naperville North High School, that social studies teacher, talk a little bit about that influence. What was it about that teacher that kind of created that spark for you to say, this is what I really want to do?
He was real. And there was no fluff. There was no, he was just very true to himself, and he could be abrasive at times, and he wasn't for everybody.
Sure.
But it clicked with me, and I know it clicked with a number of others as well. But certain teaching styles just work well, and if I could have had every teacher, like Mr. Schneider, it would have been great for me.
Sure.
It probably wouldn't have been great for the building and the administration. But, he was very real and very true to himself. And he shot you straight. And like I said, there was, and combine that with the discipline of social studies, that, it fit for me.
Yeah, those connections are, you never know, what's going to connect with a kid and influence them or help them take a positive twist on it. And so I just wanted to highlight that it's so important, especially in your role now. I know that's something you really encourage our coaches. Mm-hmm. Remember, they're always watching. Remember, they're going to follow your lead.
Absolutely.
And to be, that's that integrity thing. What do you do when people aren't looking?
Exactly.
So you talked about some teachers and some coaches that you've been around and had some exposure to. And I know specifically you've been around some pretty legendary coaches as a student athlete yourself, but also as an athletic administrator. Are there different people that stand out in your mind, and what have been some of those impressions on you? Yeah,
quite a few. And I mean, I don't have to go very far to say, hey, Gordy Kirkman.
Sure.
And as an athlete myself, we never played West Aurora during my time at Naperville North, but I remember coming to a sectional game between Naperville Central and West Aurora at West Aurora when I was a junior. It was the first time I was ever in the gym, and I mean, that was my first experience, and it was an eye-opening one. But that's where you start to hear about the legendary Gordy Kirkman.
Absolutely.
And having the opportunity to then coach against him and, then finally work alongside him, it was that was a great experience for me. My own high school coach, Mark Lindo, another Hall of Fame coach, was certainly an influence on me and still is to this day. My head college coach, James Lancaster, another Hall of Fame coach, and so I've been very fortunate, and all of those three still really good friends. James and I are probably like best friends. We talk all the time, and it's really cool to be able to have those relationships with those guys. And as a basketball coach, I was very fortunate to play against and then coach against a lot of other legendary coaches like Jim Roberts from Batavia, who even in retirement is still coming to games all the time, and guys like Bob Mattingly and Don Holler, who certainly people that were influential to me, and I learned so much from them, and I continue to learn from guys like that. And the one thing I always respected about all of those guys was the way they treated their players, and guys always came back. And I remember Coach Lindo telling me, "You're never gonna totally feel the impact you make until you get that first invite to a wedding, or until you get that the birth announcement of somebody's child, one of your former players' child, or you get invited to a graduation party or something like that." And that's you might not see it for a few years, and it's so true. And I've been very fortunate to maintain pretty good relationships with former players, and so now I'm starting to feel like the old guy myself. And but it's great, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of keeping that momentum moving forward, you've been, as we've talked, you've been here in West Aurora since 2012. If you'll take a few minutes reflecting back from then until current day, what are some things that you can brag about in terms of West Aurora athletics, not only from the win-loss, the accomplishment, but also, and I'm going to probe a little bit deeper, but you do some other things to build our young men and women. Mm-hmm. What sets us apart in terms of a program and what we offer compared to other districts around the state?
Yeah, I think our numbers just in and of themselves of participation, I think is really high. This year we're on pace for about 1,800 students to come out for our teams and tryouts. We typically, unfortunately we do have to cut in some sports, but we've had 1,500 students on a pretty regular basis participating in athletics throughout the seasons. And, that's something that we don't take for granted. We really hang our hat on that. And not only athletics, but in activities, we've got 60 some clubs that kids can get involved in. So from a building standpoint, I think we really do a good job getting kids involved and staying involved. And that's really something that I'm very proud of. In addition to that, I think, one of the things that sets our athletic department apart a little bit is our leadership program that we've implemented for our kids, and our Blackhawk leadership team. That's something that we've done probably. Well, this will be its 10th year, and it's grown and it's morphed into a few different iterations, and we're still learning and still trying to figure out the best way to kind of attack this. But what we like to do is get involved with the students, the student athletes as students, as teenagers, as athletes, and kind of break all those different roles down and help them grow in each of them. And that's something that we're really proud of and love to do.
So I'm going to push a little bit more on that leadership component. Not everyone does that. It's becoming more in vogue.
Sure.
But I think you've been pushing that for quite some time, even back in your Oswego East days. Mm-hmm. Give a real high-level overview. What does a session look like when you bring the student athletes in? What do you do? What's our outcomes? What's your intent on that?
Yeah, so we look to grow our students on 3 different levels. Obviously, educationally, that's number one. But socially and emotionally as well. So, and if we can do that, then we've succeeded. But to answer your question, how do we get there in a session? And all the sessions look different because, there might be a day where we're just talking about how to lead. Now that kind of comes later, because there are a lot of steps to get to that point. But what does leadership look like? What does being a competitor look like? Because sometimes being a competitor might be going toe-to-toe with an opponent, diving for a loose ball, you're on the mat, trying to get out of a headlock. That might be a competitor to some. Some might be, tapping a teammate on the back, and saying, hey, good job. In others, it might be, shaking the hand of an opponent.
Yeah.
So
win, lose, or draw.
Win, lose, or draw. And so there's a lot of components to that. And we kind of talk through some of those things. Like, what does it mean to really, compete and do the best you can? And, the other thing we talk about is not measuring yourself against others, but measuring yourself against yourself.
Sure.
And, one example we use, I show the picture of the USA basketball team. And I ask the question, are you tall? Before I show the picture, I ask, are you tall? And about half the room says, yeah, I'm tall. And then I throw that picture up there and they're like, yeah, maybe not. So, so like we want to get away from that and focusing on what we can control and not measuring ourselves against anybody else, but measuring ourselves against ourselves and controlling the controllables. And if we're able to do those things, then we're going to be in a much better position, not only on the floor or on the mat or on the field, but in the classroom, at our jobs, with our friends, with our parents at home. So, but easier said than done.
Yeah, but I think your efforts are not unnoticed. I think it's still trying to build that whole kid, that whole student athlete, because there's a different set of expectations. Actually, the standard raises. You wear our colors, you wear our name. The expectation is that you step up and wear those with pride and with dignity. You carry yourself. They may not have the jersey on, but you may be out in the community and they're going to know your face. and how do you comport yourself? How do you comport yourself when you represent on the floor? So I think it takes our programs just a few steps higher, and certainly appreciate those efforts.
Yeah, and that's getting back to that front porch idea. For so many people, we are the front porch of West Aurora. And I don't necessarily mean just our community, but when an opponent, a visiting team comes to us or we go to them, they might not have any background knowledge of what we're all about, but how we comport ourselves, on the playing surface, that translates into their mindset of what we are and who we are. Right or wrong, that matters.
Providing that experience.
Exactly.
We have a relationship with the Positive Coaching Alliance. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what that does for our coaches, parents, and student athletes.
Yeah, so it's a platform. It started out as the platform for us to kind of get our leadership program off the ground, and I'd been contacted by them to, hey, what do you think about us coming in? And I was like, nah, Positive Coaching Alliance, that sounds too warm and fuzzy for me. And I was very hesitant early on, and took a meeting with their regional director, and he said, no, that's not really what we're all about. We want to win too. It's not just, hey, go out and have fun and play the game. And there was more to it. And, their motto is better athletes, better people.
Sure.
And so
you can subscribe to that.
How could you not?
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, it ended up being a really good fit. And so we started that out with our student athletes. And then that kind of evolved into a little bit more of a relationship with not only our athletes, but also our coaches. And they've come out to us and held coaches workshops for all of our coaches, and done some work with our parents as well at some of our preseason meetings. And if nothing else, it gives our coaches and our parents a different voice. The message is pretty consistent, but just like anybody else, sometimes you just need to hear it from somebody else. From that point, I actually inquired about, well, I really like what you guys are doing. How can I get involved with this? And so about 6 or 7 years ago, I started. I just asked the question, what does it take to work with you guys and maybe go deliver some of these workshops myself? And because it was something I started to feel passionately about.
Yeah.
And I went through about a 6-month training process, and it was something that was very beneficial for me as an athletic director, because I was able to pull from both sides. I pull some PCA stuff and incorporate it into my job on a daily basis. And, the opposite was true as well. So, I've delivered workshops all across Northern Illinois. I've gone into the city and, talked to travel baseball teams. And
how neat is that?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Open some doors for you.
Without question. And, it's something that, I definitely don't take for granted, the opportunities that I've been afforded because of that. And so, gotten to meet some really interesting people and make some great connections with some other athletic directors who have kind of done the same thing. And, had a lot of schools reach out to me and say, hey, we hear you're involved with that. Would you like to come out? I gave a parent presentation to the Geneva High School just before COVID, and it was great, because it was one I could draw on my own athletic director experiences as well.
Sure.
And say, here's what we experience at West Aurora, and a lot of those experiences are very similar, and here's why we're doing what we're doing. And so the PCA's helped us grow our program here at West, and really broadened my experiences as well.
Sounds like a good choice.
Absolutely.
Good for you. Good for us. I want to shift a little bit. I know that recently the IHSA has made some criteria changes in terms of officiating, really encouraging our youth to re-engage in that. If they can't be a student athlete, maybe they could be an official, or maybe they could do a little bit of both, but sure, allowing 16-year-olds, especially at the youth level and the lower levels, to begin officiating in our sports. And I saw evidence of that on Sunday at a youth tournament where we had a lot of kids that were officiating and getting some really positive experiences. So that was one measure that the state took, the IHSA, to encourage more officials, because we've seen challenges. I think we had 2 weekends, 2 Friday night games got moved to a Wednesday or Thursday because of a lack of officials.
Yep.
And it's not just at football. It's pretty global right now. So what are some things that we are doing to encourage more officials to be out? And then what are some things that you're seeing from a veteran athletic administrator that are discouraging officials? What's causing the depletion of the numbers? And what are some things we can do to correct that?
Well, I'll start with the negative. And, going back to the early days of athletics I'd say specifically baseball, there was always that kill the ump mentality. Yeah. And I believe there was even a movie, Kill the Umpire, in the 1950s. And that mentality has really kind of taken hold with fans, and it's had like a trickle down effect from the professional ranks into the colleges, which then go into the high school and then the youth. And it's been incredibly frustrating to see as a parent, as an athletic director, as a coach, the mistreatment. And now I will be the first to admit I haven't always had the greatest conversations with officials when I was coaching and in the heat of the moment, but I'd like to think I developed relationships with a lot of the officials throughout the years of coaching that, I could always come back to them and say, hey, your angle might have been a little bit better than mine or something like that. And I always tried to leave it in a good place, but it's tough. And I think right now there's a lot of pressure on parents and athletes to get noticed and to get scholarships.
Absolutely.
And so when things don't go as planned during a game, well, one easy target is the officials. And that shouldn't be. And I struggle quite a bit when, people are really getting after an official, and, I'm thinking to myself that they don't know if their spouse or their family's at the game, because a lot of times they do bring their families. And I can't imagine what that would feel like to hear.
That vitriol.
Yeah.
And it gets that extreme.
It really does. And it's very disheartening, because we would never say that about an athlete. We would as a parent, we would certainly never say that about, another kid on the team or something like that. So that's been frustrating. And the officials aren't getting any younger. And a lot of them are kind of aging out at this point.
Absolutely.
And COVID only, magnified that. And so, long way to get to your question. We've actually adopted a new class this year in PE on officiating. So we're trying to grow from within. I know a lot of other schools in the area have, if they haven't gotten to the point where they've started those classes yet, they're in the works, because everybody recognizes the need, and it's not just something that is a local problem. This is a national problem, and something that we need to get corrected. And so I've tried to help spur that on a little bit, and we are promoting treating the officials well and doing the right thing. And, coaching my own kids, I always told them, I don't want to see palms up. So if you have a question about a call an official made, better not put your palms up, because that just, the body language piece of that is something
disrespectful.
And you might not mean anything by it, but it's something that we as coaches and we as players need to do a better job at. And if we're doing that, then I think the parents might fall in line a little bit more. And I've been presented the opportunity by the Southwest Prairie Conference to be our representative on the Northern Illinois School Officials Committee, which takes a look at officials' pay throughout Northern Illinois. And so we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years to make it a little bit more lucrative for them. And so I'm proud of the fact that, I can say that, I've been in the room where we've really helped the officials out because, for a lot of them, it didn't pay to come to a high school game when they could go officiate a youth game for less time and more money. So we really wanted to get in line with, what they deserve to be paid as opposed to what they were being paid.
Yeah, and it's, as you say, it's sometimes there's not enough money to take some of the verbal attack that happens. So good comments. I appreciate that. I'm gonna ask you to put your leadership hat on. The other day you got a chance when I was over at the high school to do some classroom observations with Dr. Hiscock, and got a chance to sit in on Coach Eimer, our head football coach, his recruiting seminar, for lack of all the coaches in the building. And was really impressed by the thought process, the strategies, because there's lots of options. And back to your comments about, kids and parents are trying to get noticed. How do I get picked up by a college? Or, look at that post-secondary opportunity. So from your experiences, your perspective, what kind of advice would you give to coaches, parents, student athletes about that approach to that post-secondary, that me mentality sometimes that gets in the way of actual performance? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, if you would.
Yeah, and it's easy to fall into that trap that, well, I need to score the most points. I need to get the most tackles. I need to have the most playing time. As I spent 3 years as an assistant coach at Aurora University, so I've been out on the recruiting trail. I've walked out of a gym when I saw an athlete just walk to the end of the bench, disregard his teammates, and just sit there and pout. And said that's not the kind of guy we want.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to a number of college coaches in a number of sports because of working in the athletic office. You see a lot of people coming and going and attending games, and the overwhelming sentiment is we want to get somebody who's a good fit for our program, and those character issues are definitely at the top of the list.
Underscore, highlight, embolden.
Oh, absolutely. And we can't impress upon our student athletes enough that everybody they recruit is a good player. So you don't have to score a little bit more or do a little bit more for them to understand you're a good player. They wouldn't be there if you weren't.
Sure.
But what's going to take you over the top is the extra stuff.
Who are you?
And who exactly? And as you mentioned earlier, who are you when nobody's looking? And unfortunately, we see all the time. We see the negative in people when others are looking, and so that when they're not looking, gosh, you really start to wonder then. But adversity is good. Adversity is good. So getting through a rough struggle in a game, throughout a season, in the classroom, coaches can see that, and it's a good thing. So we don't have to, not everything has to be perfect. And it's good for coaches to see some of those things take place and how you bounce back from that. Now, as far as getting noticed, the game has changed because back in our day, and yes, I'm throwing us in the same day. If you were good enough, they'd find you.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think that's still true. But what can really separate you is, having an advocate. And Coach Eimer is a prime example of being that advocate within the football program, and as somebody who is not only advocating for his own student athletes but others in the area. And we've seen kids at Oswego High School, kids in Batavia, kids at other schools, just in conversation come up with college coaches. Hey, have you looked at so and so? They can really play. And I don't know a lot of coaches that would do that. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, but I'm consistently impressed when I see that. But continue to be an advocate, not only for your own student athletes, but for others as well. And going through things as a parent through the recruiting process with my daughter, I saw that I think one of the biggest keys is go where you can play. And For some, they just want to play Division I.
Sure.
And that's great. That's an awesome goal. But are you then okay sitting on the bench for 2, 3, maybe 4 years? Because that's a tough road to hoe. And I'd encourage students to take a look at Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college. You play any of those, you're playing high level, whatever sport it is, because you're going against adults who are, they've got the same passion and drive as you do. And so from that standpoint, that's always one that I think is really important. Go where you feel like you can play. And I remember as a student athlete myself, I used to think college basketball was Duke and North Carolina.
Absolutely.
And that was it. And then I went and on a recruiting visit and watched a game at AU, and they were playing Benedictine, their rival. And I was like, well, these are grown men out here. And I don't know if I can play this game. And that almost scared me off a little bit, but it made me realize, like, wow, there's high level of basketball being played at all levels. And, having been to a number of sporting events and participated in sporting events, at the Division III level and see some D2 games, it's great stuff. So an opportunity to play at the next level should be taken advantage of. But my biggest piece of advice, go where you can play.
So I hope our students, I hope our parents, I hope staff members are hearing that. That's awesome advice. It was certainly a takeaway that I got just listening to Coach Eimer for a few moments. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I'm going to ask for your perspective one more time.
Sure.
As we wrap up here, you know that I've been a strong proponent around elevating the conversation around public education. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, where do you think we are in public education today? You get a chance to see the student/athlete, and there's a reason that student is before athlete. Can't be an athlete if you're not a student. What's different? What's changed? Where are we heading, and what are you encouraging?
Well, I think we're in an okay spot. I take that back. I think we're in a pretty good spot, but we're not anywhere close to where I think we could be. But I think we're moving in the right direction. We've got to be very careful about what we read and what we watch on TV, because we can always fall into the narrative, that public education is imploding and things are terrible and it's a dumpster fire and stuff like that. And I hear far too often, can you believe what they're teaching at so-and-so, or do you know how they handled this situation? And a lot of it is misinformation or just very, very small portions of the information. And people don't have a full grasp of what's actually taking place. There are so many great things happening in schools today, and it's something that I kind of wish I would have had back when I was in high school.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, are students able to recite, and I'll go the social studies route, are they able to recite every president in order in the year that they served? No. Can they necessarily recite every element on the periodic table? Probably not. But at the end of the day, we are really fostering an environment of critical thinking. And that is something that, I don't know way back when that we did a very good job of that.
I would agree.
And I would say even me as a teacher, I look back at some of my practices from my early years teaching. I didn't do that nearly well enough. I thought I did, and at the time I was doing what was asked, but we evolve. And I think the question of why, or how did you get to that answer, is being asked more. And I was just in 2 classrooms yesterday, both social studies classes, and the amount of times I heard something along the lines of why, or what makes you say that, or how'd you get there? That was amazing, because then the students really had to think, well, I just read it on the sheet. No,
sure.
No, or was that accurate? What you read, was that accurate?
It isn't that ultimately what we want them to do.
That's
think
exactly
for themselves.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's going to carry them much further than, knowing that Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president. And so, from that standpoint, I'm really encouraged by the direction we're heading. But like I said earlier, I don't think we're anywhere near where we're going to end up. But I love what we're seeing in our classrooms at West Aurora High School. Gives me personally a lot of pride to see the evolution of the teaching profession, and I've seen it just as an administrator over the last 11 years, how much the teaching profession has changed, and our staff has adapted to that, which is amazing, because I think, as a 22-year educator, that's hard to do, because now I'm starting to be one of the old guys. And, would I be able to adapt as well? I'd like to think I would, but, seeing some of those 25, 30-year teachers fully embracing some new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things has been absolutely amazing.
It's
and
encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for the positivity around public education. And thanks for your commentary today. I appreciate you being on, and I hope people have taken note. You get a ringside seat to see our kids in the classroom, on the performance stage. You get to see our staff members then turn into coaches, be able to mentor our kids and create champion human beings as well as champion student athletes. So thank you for all that you bring to the table. Thank you for being here today. Jason Buckley, our District Athletic Director of West Aurora Schools. Please remember that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including iTunes, Google Podcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and the TuneIn Radio app. And we will see you next time. Thank you.